Hey, how you doing, everyone? It's Keith Hayden, the digital novelist, back with another video. I'm the author of 5 print books in 2024. I'm working on my second novel, my 6th book of this year, Gates of Okinawa, a supernatural horror novel. If you are interested in seeing more behind-the-scenes videos, audio recordings, blog posts, all these different things to help you accelerate your novel writing process, then head over to my website, keithhayden.net, and you can find more information there. In this video, I'm going to talk about what I'm seeing a little bit from editing chapters 28 to 31 of my novel, Gates of Okinawa. Let's get into it. I've talked a lot about in this series, and if you haven't caught the rest of the series, by the way, you can find the rest of them on my website. But I've talked a lot about how this manuscript just isn't scary enough. And that rings true throughout. I've written and recorded a lot about how horror is not it's not the genre that I default to. And I just wrote a piece, if you're interested, about that on Substack. Just head to my Substack. I'll put a link in the description for what I wrote yesterday, talking about how I'm a horrible horror writer. And it's because it's a lot of reasons, but a lot of it's just kind of my mindset and how I kind of move through life. I just don't, I don't think I have all these demons and shit chasing me all the time, and so it's harder for me to put that onto the page. So I struggle a little bit with that, and I'm finding in this manuscript it's more adventure. It kind of evolved into a horror story. It started as like an alien story, and then it slowly became more horror over time. And there's probably more comedy in this than there is horror right now. But I'm working on it. I'm finding ways to make it better and go through it. But in these chapters, 28 through 31, there's been some really interesting things in here. And yeah, I think, I mean, one of them is dialogue. I've talked about this before, but dialogue is just kind of one of those things where I'm just naturally good at it. And it's a lot of it's because of my experience, my background. I used to teach when I was in the military. I was a cop. I was an investigator. So that involves a lot of listening to conversations, really getting the nuance of what people are saying, talking to all different people from all walks of life. And it just comes from being an observer. So if you're trying to, if dialogue is one of those things that you struggled with, because in the beginning when I started writing my first novel, it was a struggle. I was really afraid to write dialogue because I was like, I don't know what to put in here, like, because if you read books on writing, you'll see that dialogue isn't just writing what everybody says. Good dialogue really focuses in on characterization. It focuses in on style. It focuses in on plot because it's ideal if your dialogue is revealing the character and the story at the same time. This isn't really easy to do in the beginning, though, when you don't understand really how it's working. So if your dialogue is kind of wooden and unrealistic and unnatural, then try and listen more. Whenever you go out, whenever you're around your family, your friends, whenever you're on your job, whatever your job is, you probably hear other people talking. And this is where I get a lot of inspiration for scenes in my novels. I remember when I was writing my first novel, Sirius and Limnic, there's a lot of back and forth between teenagers. And at the time, I was teaching high school and I was tutoring a lot. And so I would be just kind of a fly on the wall listening to these teenagers kind of rib at each other and make fun at each other, but it's all love at the end of the day. They were still friends. Sometimes there was tension there, and you get to see what their hangups are, what type of language they use, how's their pacing, like what type of pauses, because that's another important thing in dialogue is what's being said is just as important as what's not being said. Those little looks and those things that communicate the entire scene. It's not just the words on the page, and that's something that you need to be aware of. This wasn't supposed to be a video about dialogue, but that's just something that I'm seeing that's a bright spot in this not scary novel. But I did want to talk about something else in this video that I'm seeing in this editing, and it's the lack of connection to the characters so far that I'm seeing. And there's two characters in particular that I do feel a connection with, and that's Victor and Deborah, and you can kind of see some of their scene here. I kind of equate them to, if you've seen old school Pokemon, they're Jesse and James from Team Rocket. They're kind of bad. They're presented as bad in the beginning, but then as the story goes on, you see there's a lot more nuance and there's some subtlety, and then they even become very sympathetic characters toward the end, and that's the way I wanted them to be. They're probably the best characters in the book so far. The main protagonist, and I've seen this a lot in many media and books that I've read, is that the main protagonist, it's almost like the writers just assume that just because they're the main protagonist and they get the most screen time, that the audience will by default love them or understand them or be connected with them some way. But it doesn't work that way. And you've probably watched shows and movies that have kind of fallen into this category, this kind of trap of the main character is just kind of boring, and it kind of drags the story down because they do get a lot of screen time, but they're not very interesting because the writers didn't put like little things in there to make them more interesting, that to really reach out and have them connect. And I know that's a problem with Gates of Okinawa right now. I've talked about this before with Xena Marlowe. She just kind of, she needs a lot of work. And then I'm finding that with the students, because I'm getting to the parts of the story where the students were starting to develop them and they're having their own individual crises and things like that. And I really like this scene with Jordan and Hiroshi right here that I'm scrolling past, where they're just kind of two guys talking and chatting, and Jordan's looking at girls' asses and stuff, and Hiroshi's just kind of there. He's not very interested, but then they're trying to connect on this way. You can tell they're not really that tight, and I felt like that really came up. And Lily comes over, and Lily's probably my favorite student character because she's just kind of sarcastic, and she has this real kind of she's got a bite to her, and she's really funny. She's probably the funniest character. But that connection is missing to these characters. And this was one of the points that I wanted to bring up, is that I'm going to have to go back and add a lot to this manuscript when I rewrite it, because I've got to add those character moments, and you just can't rush those development. You just kind of need time with them on the screen or on the page in this case with writing. They need time to show up and to show, like, what are they struggling with, what do they want, what's their motivation. And because there's the main character and then there's 5 main students, that there needs to be more work done up front to really bring these characters out and have them have a chance to connect with the audience. Because right now it's just like this scene with Hiroshi, it's more of an action scene, and we're getting into this is the first kind of demon that we're encountering, and Hiroshi's kind of dealing with him, and he has this kind of mini quest that he has to do to really leading into the first gate, and we're getting into the gate quest, which is the meat of the story. But there's just something about it that it just didn't connect. Like, it visually it was fine, like there was action, it was engaging, but I didn't feel that connection to Hiroshi. And I think it's because the work wasn't done ahead of time. Now he's in this moment, but we don't really know who he is. We just know he's some kid that is being encountered by a demon now, or ghost, or spirit, or whatever you want to call it, is calling his name. So that's one of the things. The more characters you add, the longer your story probably needs to be by default, because you really need to put time into developing them. What do you think? Have you ever struggled with this? You've thrown a boatload, shitload of characters in, but then you don't know what to do with them, let me know in the comments how your writing's going. And I hope these editing videos are helpful for you, just seeing somebody going through their own stuff, because I wrote this not too long ago, maybe like, I don't know, a month ago or so, and I'm going through it and I'm discovering things. It's that zooming out, the forest from the trees, because when you're writing, just writing words, you're just getting sentences and scenes down. But now I'm zooming out and seeing what's working and what's not. And so far, this novel's a mess, y'all. I'm sitting here like, oh God, am I gonna have to rewrite this whole thing? No, I'm not gonna have to rewrite this whole thing, but there's gonna be, when I set the release date of October 31st, Halloween, I was like, I'll have plenty of time. Plenty of time. Well, turns out I might need every single day up to that point to get this done. So if you're interested in following more of these videos, hit the links in the description, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Peace.